most of today, you're just gonna have to see my smiley face. I'm not putting it on the screen till way later. Okay, today we're talking about when Tzadi Beis Ches. We're talking about Zei'ah. So first, I'm going to talk about some of the basic dinim, but just sort of quickly, because we really did it when we did Hagol's Kalim way back when, 1,000 years ago. And that was like this. There are two places, well, that I know of, two places that the Rishonim speak about. What's the din when you have a hot vapor coming out of something? You have some kind of a food cooking and hot vapor comes out of it. What's the status of that vapor? So one is the Rivash. The Rivash says if you cook up wine, you distill wine and you turn it into brandy. So over here, there's a pot of wine, and over there, on the other side, all of a sudden we get dripping out brandy, and in between there's this like empty tube in between. So that's one. That's the Rivash says that it has the din of wine. So it's usher. The point is that it's from Stam Yain, so it's usher. Oh, look at that. Okay, and then the second is, I thought you wanted to sit over there. And the second is the Rosh, who says that if you're cooking up a pot of milk and the vapors that come out of that milk hit the salami that's drying on the, or the piece of meat that's hanging on the top. In the case it was a pot, but the way the Shulchan Aruch brings it is it's the salami that's drying on the top. So then, if it's yatz ledas, but when it hits it, then it makes that into bas b'chalav, because the vapors that are coming out of the milk are considered mechutz also. Okay, so that Rivash is brought in halachos Stam Yain, and the Rosh is brought in this din Tzadi Beis Ches. Okay, so the din of excuse me, of Zei'ah, just as a side, is only when there's some kind of a liquid, like in the cases that I gave you, it was wine, or if it was milk, or if even it was a moist food, we would say that it has Zei'ah from it also. If it's something dry like a loaf of bread, then it's a different set of rules called Reicha. When we get to when we get to Sim Kufches, we'll talk about those. Okay,
everything has moisture, of course.
Significant moisture enough to count for the din of Zei'ah. We get to a loaf of bread that's considered something dry that has something called Reicha. It's a lower grade of amount of time that comes through. Okay, so these two Rishonim are talking about time going so far. Are talking about time going from the liquid someplace else. So the wine is turning into over there, on the other end is turning into brandy, or the milk is hitting the meat and making bas b'chalav. But there's also, the time can go back also, can transfer backwards into the thing that it came from. What's the case? The case is the same in the same rush, which is the milk is cooking up and hitting the salami that's drying on top of it, up on top of the oven. It's a warm place, it's drying over there. So the salami is now bas b'chalav. If there's condensation on the salami, that some of the milk condenses on the salami, so now that's bas b'chalav, and that drips back down and makes the milk treif. Drips. If it drips, it specifically has to drip.
You say there's anything in our contemporary kitchens that have Zei'ah?
That's what we're talking about today. That's why you came today, to find out about cases of Zei'ah. Right? If it wouldn't be cases, I wouldn't tell you.
Microwave?
It's on the things I'm talking about. Yeah, it's got to be on top.
Okay. You never saw a pot boiling?
No. I mean, that have they come back?
Come back.
No, I know.
So far, everything I said now is just a short chazar from what we did when Hagol's Kalim. Really, just to prepare us for the case that we're talking about. Yes. Okay. So one of the cases actually we talked about then was a faucet, which is if a person pours a spaghetti into the sink through the colander to drain out all the water out of it. He's making spaghetti and he pours water into it. There's lots of vapor comes out of that as you pour it in. There's lots of vapor coming out of that. So the faucet that's hanging over that just became chametz. Okay, even though if no spaghetti ever touched it, but the vapors coming out of that spaghetti as you pour it in is making your faucet chametz. Okay, so and therefore come Pesach you have the Kashrus. Okay, we're not going to talk about how you Kashrus. It's not relevant. The point is just that the Zei'ah hits that faucet. The Zei'ah goes up and hits the faucet. And now your faucet is chametz, and I got to do something about that if you want to use that faucet for Pesach. Okay, that was the case we talked about. Okay, so today we're going to talk about some examples.
That's a great example. I don't think people realize that.
Okay.
Well, I was wondering why there's chametz in the sink. What's the big deal?
What did you say?
I think people in the back of their mind, I was wondering why it's so critical to kasher sink and the faucet. How can you have hot chametz in there?
Okay, so there you go. Okay. So let's talk about a few cases. Okay. So As I said to you, the Zei'ah comes out of when you're cooking a pot of. So first we'll do a stovetop. Okay, Zei'ah, you're cooking up a pot, like I think you just said, you're cooking up a pot, and you see lots of vapor coming out of it. Okay, so that vapor, if like the Rama says, if it hits something when it's still hot, when it's still yatzlet boy, then it makes it milchim suflations, depending on what it hit from.
Now that's just water, it's H2O.
That water is considered milchim suflations. That's this din. That the water you pour in a pot of milk. What comes out of it is considered milk. Even why is water milk? It's milk. So it's milk.
This is water.
So you're saying so from a scientific perspective, I say it's okay. So I don't know. It's gonna sound funny. You could argue with the rush.
I'm wondering if there's something else we don't not exactly familiar with that it's splattering.
Do you hear what it says? Okay, makes it milk. Because okay, the simplest reason is because if you cook water with milk together, what would be the din of the water? The water would be milk. Tam kicker. No, I'm saying so the water that's coming out is
now I did actually manage to isolate.
Okay, and the second reason is because it doesn't travel by itself. It's not pure. It doesn't just come.
So what you're saying would come into play 500 years ago when the din was that you could be Samech on Tima. Then what would happen? You have some kind of problem. You do Tima, say, hey, I'll taste the milk. Why? Because it was really the water that went through.
Sure.
But today that we don't do Samech on Tima anymore, so now we're stuck.
There's no question. This water is the Zei'ah now. It's pure water. The drink.
I understand. I agree with you, and that's why there wouldn't be a time. There would not be a time of yesterday. And
it's pure water.
I don't know. No, I don't agree with it actually. But this for sure carry. This for sure. Mostly, it's for sure. This carryover also. Anyhow, so because of this reason, Shulchan gives two things that you should be careful about. Then one is he says if the person is putting spices into their food. Okay, you're pouring spices into your chicken soup. The person is pouring spices into it. So if you hold the spice container close to the pot, where it's still yatzla this way, then he's going to make his milchins or flations. Okay, in the case of chicken soup, he make flations. Okay, so then he therefore tells you should have separate spices or put spices into your hand or into a spoon before you put them into the pot, or else you're going to make the spices in the remaining spices in the container, not the ones that fall out, the ones that are saved behind, and make them milchins or flations.
So two comments. First of all, no one would hold it there if it's yatzla this way because it would burn.
Okay, that's a
number
good
two.
point.
Doesn't the container itself have to get yatzla this way?
So then we have a question. But then we have a questions of katal gavar, of what happens if one thing is hot and the other thing is not. Then we have to think about that. Okay, that's what to think about. Okay. Well, his next example is where it is hot, and that is if you want to put water into your chong. Okay, so you take the kettle and you pour water from the kettle into your chong. So your kettle is hot, and you pour that into the chong, and you might even put that close because it has a handle on it. So you put it close. So then the tom from the chong is now spreading back into your kettle, which is your kettle, which you wanted to be power, all of a sudden just became inflation. Okay. Now, a related thing is some people have you have it in your house.
I've heard that going back to the spice case. I've heard people being machar because they're concerned about splashes.
Okay.
Zei'ah itself is hard to hear.
Okay, so I can understand that. Okay. Now on top of your stovetop, you have a hood. Okay, something that just sort of directs the heat to holds it in together. So in most houses, the hood is not low enough that it's going to become yatzla. Okay, it's usually higher up where it doesn't. What do you say?
I have no hood.
You don't have a hood? Okay, so
take it from your car. Of course, it's not going to be yatzla display because it will be dangerous.
Why would it be dangerous?
It's going to catch the house on fire.
Catch the house on fire. Okay, I'm not sure about that, but okay, maybe you don't have to think about that. But in a commercial kitchen, you go into a pizza shop or a commercial kitchen, there's always a hood, and there where the fire burns all day and there's many fires going on time, it can in fact be yatzla this way over there. So that if it is,
the lower end.
What do you mean the lower end?
120.
Whatever it is, it gets hot. Okay, there's pots cooking there all day long.
Try it.
What do you say?
You ever touch it?
Of course. So and it gets hot. Now, but it happens to there's a side issue, nothing to do with Zei'ah.
There's air also.
Nothing to do with Zei'ah, which is that there's loads of food and grease gets stuck up there. That's nothing to do with the Zei'ah part of it. Just I'm mentioning a hood. I'll tell you anyhow. It has to be clean. It's one of the things Yankee likes to do when he walks into a place on the Kashrus for Pesach, is to touch the rim of that hood, and it's always full of grease if they didn't clean well.
Grease.
Grease.
carried there by the Zei'ah.
If you cook, yes.
Splatters.
It's hard to imagine it splatters, 2-3 feet high, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it gets there. But it's there. Okay, the guys been cooking. They cook all year long on the same stovetop. Lots and lots of stuff. I'm not sure. Okay, you can call it whatever you want to, but it's greasy and disgusting. If they don't do a good job, if the Mashiach's not doing a good job, making sure they do it, then it's going to be a mess. Okay, anyhow. Okay, let's move now from a stovetop to an oven. Okay. Okay, I forgot to tell you, I'm going to throw in a piece here, which is Pri Megadim says that this din of Zei'ah is only true if you cook, in the case of the Rosh, you cook milk in the pot, then the tam that was spread would be a problem of Zei'ah would become milchus. If the thing you cooked in there was parav, when you're making a parav of soup, when you're making spaghetti in the milk of the pot, then it wouldn't become milchus. It has to do with not barnat. It's all complicated details of not barnat. Mitzvah Shem, one day we'll get to that. Because it'll be if you could spaghetti, because the time would have to spread, it became milk of the pot into the spaghetti into further on. Okay. Okay, now into an oven. When you cook your food in your oven, so you cook, you put a piece of chicken into the oven, so it has Zei'ah coming out of it, and it makes your oven fleshing.
What kind of chicken? That's how you're baking it.
No, we assume that most things. What do you say?
Crumb chicken?
If you put crumbs on, maybe then, maybe I don't know. We assume most things have Zei'ah to it. I gave my example of bread. I give my example of bread because that's like for sure that it has no Zei'ah to it. So you said if I coated it with crumbs, maybe then it was okay, maybe. So anyhow, in most cases, by the time when you think about your oven, how many times you use it, so then it became fleshing, so milchus, whichever one you want to. So there's Blios from that Zei'ah goes all over the oven, okay, into the walls, to the ceiling and the walls and the grates for chaim. Okay, so the
grates inside.
The racks.
The
racks. Okay, so the therefore you assume, everyone assumes that therefore your oven, if you want to go from milchus to fleshing, needs to be kasher. Okay, it's really not so clear. We're going to pause for a second. It's really not so clear why it needs to be kasher. It does become milchus or fleshing, that's for sure. That's the din of Zei'ah. But I told you that the only way that to let's say it is fleshings, the only way that could affect your food that you make in there is if the tam comes back. Okay, tam doesn't come back from Zei'ah unless there's condensation. Okay, and the physics tells us that in every case, there's not going to be any condensation in your stove, in your oven. There won't be condensation to then drip back.
So if you don't say chibur, you don't say the Zei'ah is a chibur.
It's not a chibur, so it just has to condense. And the reason it doesn't condense is because condensation is when the hot product hits a cold surface and therefore cools down and turns it back into a liquid. But in your oven, the walls get hot before the food does. Okay, because the metal heats up faster. So the metal gets hot before your food. By the time the Zei'ah hits the wall's already hot. So it doesn't condense on it.
So you're saying that's you're making your oven trays, but who cares?
So who would care? So Ramosha, when he speaks about it, he says if there's condensation, he makes the dik in the Ramah. You have to see condensation. You don't assume there's condensation. You have to see it. He said. I think it's in Kufches. No. I don't think he said it right. Okay. But he said, but he says a kosher can in an oven where it's so hot, for sure it's going to happen. Okay, but it's really the opposite. Okay, but Lamais is there are possibilities. It is possible for it to happen, which is like if you stuck in hot food into your oven as you turned it on. Okay, you're stuck in a pot from one oven to another. You took something out that was hot and you stuck in it. It's possible you could get. It's possible. There's also for
the racks.
There's also for the racks. And if the rack has food on it and you put your pot onto it, and also
no, if it's dry, then they blow against it.
Right, and your pot is dirty, or if something spills out of your pot, then the vapor that comes out of that will take out the flesh go milchus tam in your oven and bring it back into your pot. From the floor. Okay, so it's possible. It's not so clear. But it's assumed that you have to
fires on the floor. That it's kosher.
If the fire is underneath the floor, then potentially, right? So so these are all like we're trying to piece it together. It's
piece together
well, for sure. No, for sure. It's a we call it a Bobby clause. That Bobby said no way you can't use the same oven for milk inflations. That's not the way to run your kosher kitchen. Okay, but we assume that you have to kasher it. Exactly the technicalities of it is not. I'm on 100%. Okay, so now if you wanna, now that we decided that you have to somehow do that. You have to have it separate from milk inflations. If you could use you know this, you could use the same oven for both. And the way you do that is you designate it for one use, let's say for fleshig use. And once in a while, when you want to make milchigs, you put a piece of foil underneath the pot. So no Blios transfer from the racks into your pot, because ain't no blue yotze. We'll talk about that one day. Next time. And you cover the top of the pan also. Okay, so this way you prevented it because is it right here? The Ramah says here, then you don't have to worry about that because then the condensation can't drip back down because it can't fall into your thing. Okay, so you don't help for pizza. So it doesn't help for certain foods, right? You can't certain foods covered, just it doesn't work right. But it works for lots of other foods. Okay, it's a potential that you can cover the food. So you put something underneath it to prevent Blios from coming from the racks, and you put something on the top. Now it happens to be in that the cover that you put on top of it. The goal here of the cover is not to prevent Zei'ah from getting out. The goal here is to prevent dripping from coming back in. Okay, so for that reason, and even for the Zei'ah part of it, it doesn't have to be a hermetic seal. It doesn't have to be perfectly sealed. The Teres Chatas, when he talks about it, he says this, I'm going to read the words. He says, which is, so he doesn't say there's no Zei'ah. He says is the amount that's going to come out is not going to be a difference. It's sort of like on the level of reicha, the amount that's going to come out.
Taped up your cover.
No, because I don't think he means that. I don't think he means that it's going to chafe up. It's such a little bit. It's like sort of like a reicha level amount coming out.
Kashrus is going to drip. Then you taped up your pot cover.
No. The cover is a piece of foil.
I'm asking the Ramah.
That what?
If you're saying there is Zei'ah, so then it'll chafe up.
No, because again, because the little bit of vapor that's coming out is not enough to make a difference. That's like a reicha coming out. That little bit that escapes out of the not perfectly covered.
Why do the Zei'ah is going to drip down onto your pot cover?
Because there's no vapor coming up to make it drip down because you covered it. So again, there's a little bit escaping, but there's basically nothing coming out. So nothing's going to drip down because there ain't nothing. There's no heat, no liquid to bring it back down.
So you're assuming a riot from there that obviously was not sealed.
Right, that's correct.
Otherwise, why would he even talk about Zei'ah?
Right, the Zei'ah is an oyster. It doesn't make such a difference because there may be a traces of it, but nothing significant, and therefore it does not. Okay, that's not here. It's in Teres Chatas. Okay. Okay, now related to that is that there are people who have double ovens, which is like a two ovens on top of each other. So when you look at it, at first you might think that they share a wall. I can't imagine anybody making it that the wall in between them is a shared wall. It's hard to imagine. It looks like it, but it's really probably two walls with insulation. And that's the pashas how they make it. But you could tell. You could just touch it. Touch it if you want. It's not always easy to see like that because there's like fancy covers on the front. It's not always it.
It's space-wise.
So you can maybe figure it, but anyway, you can touch it. You just turn one on and touch the other side and see if it get hot. But the other problem is that the vents that if they share a vent between them, then Zei'ah will pass from one to the other one. And in fact, there was one situation, whatever it was, we went to a place actually that had hashgacha that was using a double. It was a sort of a double oven. It's not exactly, but sort of like a double oven, and one was milchigs and one was leishigs. Okay, and the question was whether they shared a vent. Okay, so in this case, so I said, well, let's see. And we put food into one side and we turned it on. And so like a cloud was pouring out of the other side. It was like very dramatic how much Zei'ah was coming to the other side. I mean, it was like the stuff was just shooting out into the other side. It was very dramatic. Okay, in home ovens is not as common. And you have to study the plans and figure out whether they do or don't share a vent as to whether Tom would transfer from one to the other one. If they don't, then one could know who's inflation. It's two ovens, they have nothing to do with each other. They're not connected. And if they are connected, then we got a problem.
You didn't talk about the fact that our ovens are vented, that they go at the back, so mechtes and accumulation is there to do.
So the having a vent is really a reicha kind of a thing, whether that's a problem. Whether the Zei'ah is there, the Zei'ah is there. The fact that some of it escapes is not going to take away from the thing. Think about the Ramah's case. You have a pot of milk and there's a salami on top of it. It's very vented. It's open. It's wide open. You know what I mean? The venting has to do with reicha. Whether we worry about this reicha in small amounts, that's a different for that. Okay. My battery's running out. Okay. No, my battery on my recorder. Okay. Hopefully it'll keep on. I don't know if it plots. Okay, I'll take it off the whatever. Okay, so the next case we have to talk about is a microwave. Okay, a microwave. As you know, there's no heat source. There's no electric or fire inside of it that's making it hot. but rather through magic, the microwaves heat up the food, and then somehow magically it heats up the food. However, microwaves work. Okay, and what happens is the chamber and the kalim even become only hot because they're touching hot food. So the bowl, you have your food in a bowl. The bowl gets hot because it's touching hot food, and the chamber gets hot also. For the same reason, there's hot Zei'ah switching around, so therefore it gets hot. Okay, so the microwave is a great example of these things that we're talking about, because over here the Zei'ah, of course, spreads from your food. Let's say you're heating up oatmeal, so the Zei'ah is coming out of it and spreading on into the chamber, and when it hits the walls, it's hitting a cold surface. So there is definitely going to be condensation. Okay, you could see it in your microwave if you want to boil up a pot. You'll see this condensation on top of it because it's in cold surface, much better than in our oven.
I've never opened my microwave and saw it dripping.
I can tell you for a fact, my microwave turned rusty on top. First, I have to throw it away because of all the condensation. It rusted out the top.
Did you ever see drips coming on your microwave? You ever open your microwave and saw the walls dripping?
When I Kashrus, yeah.
The ceiling, not the walls, the ceiling.
I've never ever seen that.
Okay.
It's moist. It's definitely moist.
Okay.
Anyhow,
I guess a lot of typical foods don't have a lot of moisture. You put in, I guess, liquids.
right, you put in spaghetti, you're not going to see anything. You know what I mean? You have to put in a bowl of soup.
Put a cup of water. Go do it. Test it. Go here.
Okay, so what we said beforehand for an oven had to do the same oven for milching inflations, works for microwaves also. That if you cover the food, there it's more likely to be dirty than in your oven. So you have to put something on the bottom, of course, put it on the bottom, and put something on the top, and you can use it. There's such a thing as plate covers they make for microwaves. Okay, plate covers. They're not made from people. That's not what they're making it for. I guess they wanted to keep from spritzing. I'm not sure what the point is. They're put in your microwave, and if the holes are, they make them with holes they have holes in them because they don't want them to explode. So if the holes are on the side, then you're good. Holes on the top is not such a smart idea. Okay. Anyhow.
You're saying again, the only concern in the microwave is for bed, so just put something on bottom.
For the Zei'ah, so you
also a simple cover and not hermetically sealed.
Just put it on top of it. Right. Now, so I meant to say that in microwaves, things move around a lot. There's a lot of Zei'ah v'chahena, so it's easy for your cover to come off. Okay, it's different than in an oven. In an oven, it's more stable. So people double seal it because they want to be extra careful. Then it's not going to fall off while they're using it.
About Zei'ah.
They're afraid that if the cover comes off, if the cover is going to come off, they're going to get into trouble. That's a reason why people might say, I'm going to double cover. So I'm more careful. It's more moving parts and it's harder to control than in an oven. So whereas in an oven, you put a piece of foil on top of it. Here, you of course can't put foil, but what you're putting on top of it is more easy to break or fall apart or get ripped open by all the steam pouring out of it. So people will put a double cover as a safety. It's not a dim.
You know those microwavable shelf-stable meals?
No, I believe you. Okay.
So
like amazing meals, whatever. It's in a plastic container, then a cardboard box, and a plastic wrap on top of it.
The inside container is sealed, very strong seal to make it shelf-stable, and then it's in a box. You put it straight in the microwave. And very often, eventually, it blows up.
Yeah,
exactly. But when it blows up sideways.
Yeah.
So you're good.
So the Zei'ah is not coming in.
Yeah, or if you want another example of the same thing is if you want to make a microwave popcorn in the microwave, okay, it doesn't have it comes with a sort of built-in cover, the bag that it comes in. So that's good.
At the ends.
And then on the sides, so you're good.
So you can even put it on a dirty microwave. These things you can even put in a dirty microwave.
So if there's
oil,
if there's food on the bottom, if there's dirty, if the
tray,
place you put it onto has food sitting on it,
it's a plastic wrapper, a cardboard box.
Oh, in your case,
container.
not in my
the
popcorn.
Popcorn is very
Not on the
relevant.
popcorn, right? Okay, not on the popcorn.
So you're saying you should put a plate on the bottom just to
Put
keep
a paper plate or something on there that keep the.
This is a video.
Therefore,
You're comfortable with this, John?
we do it all the time.
No one does it.
What?
No one does what?
Microwave popcorn, a tray for you travel in the hotel.
There's 3 people in this room. At least 30% of the people in the room do that. So anyhow, okay. Okay, so now on to our next thing. So this we'll get back to finally get to our screen. And now I don't like doing this in the middle, but hold on a second.
They have a video saying you shouldn't do that.
No, just that's the big oil. I didn't could be on routes. So no. When we travel, it's always a challenge. So I make the microwave popcorn.
It's cool to seriously, they'll tell you how to do it. Oh my God. I'll
Just
take it back.
just put it on top of a plate, that's all. Put it on a plate.
It was completely open. It said the vibrator will go crazy for me.
Okay. I'll tell you afterwards a different thing that you need to close seriously about. Okay, now let's go to our next thing. Okay. Our next thing is Hookah. Okay. Okay. The revash, I'm going to explain in a second. You don't have to read all the little words. I couldn't get rid of all the little words from my picture. So from the picture,
It's worse.
I know, but I'm gonna put my own words over here. But if you, I'm trying not to distract you. Okay, so the revash and the rush are both talking about what happens when the Zei'ah gets to someplace else. Okay, the wine becomes brandy and the milk hits the meat. Okay, so both of them are talking about what happens when the Zei'ah gets someplace else. Okay, but it's implicit in what they're saying that the Zei'ah itself is usher. Okay, in other words, the question is what happens when the Zei'ah, when the wine turns into brandy over there, or the milk hits the salami? What does it do to the second place where it gets to? But the thing itself is usher. Okay, the thing itself is usher. Just they're talking about okay, but what happens on the second step when it gets to someplace else? Okay, so we're going to talk about two examples. Okay, Hookah is our first one of places where we can talk about the Zei'ah itself, not where it gets to, but the Zei'ah itself. Okay, so what's a hookah? Okay, so hookah is like you see here in the picture. There's this interesting looking device, okay, and what you do is like this. First, you take tobacco leaves. They're not always made with tobacco, but they often are. The same would be whether with or without tobacco. What?
You should put cocaine in the top.
Okay, you know, yeah.
The only thing to know is when the mic is off.
So we wouldn't certify that. So I don't know if we would certify this either. But okay, anyhow, so you put tobacco leaves or other things together with glycerin and flavors and other kinds of interesting things, and you make this mixture which they call shisha. Okay,
Where does it go?
it goes. I didn't tell you yet. That was only the first step. There's more. You see, there's gonna be room for all the
Why is
bullet
it
points.
soaked in glycerin?
Just what makes it work. I don't know why. And then you put them into a bowl that's on the very top. Okay, on the top. You see on the top, there's like I don't know what color it is, pinkish or whatever color it is. On top, you put it into the bowl. Okay, and then you put it into onto that, and you put coals there also. I may be wrong. I think we're missing a piece up here. Anyhow, you put coals on the top there, and what happens?
Where? In the gold bowl?
I'm not sure. Okay, I think I'm missing a piece over here.
It says from previous sessions.
Right. I think that the coals go in here. And the other stuff goes on the lower spot. I think we're missing a spot in there where the shisha goes, but I'm not sure. But the point, they're not touching them. They're not touching. They're in separate pieces. And the coals, the heat of the coals causes all the shisha to smolder. Okay, it doesn't burn and doesn't catch on fire. It just smolders. And what happens is all that vapor that's building up goes down the stem. In this case, it's blue, and it goes all the way deep down, all the way to the bottom.
It forces it down.
So you'll hear in a second what's forcing it down. But for the simplest thing that's forcing it down is it's just there. It's got to go someplace, so it goes down. Okay, but no, it's in here. I believe it's in here. Okay, it's in here. This is weird, and it's smoldering from. This is the fire is on the top, and in here is the holder for the shisha. So the fire is not touching it, just very hot. So it's causing it to smolder, and it's got to go someplace. The simplest thing is going someplace. Okay, so it gets pulled down into the water, and then now it's hot when it's coming down to the water. But then as it bubbles up through the water, it gets cooled down because the water is ambient temperature. Okay, so that cools down the vapors that are coming up, and it now mixes with the water. So these vapors are now mixing the water as they bubble up through the water, and then the user is holding onto this pipe that's stuck over here, that's attached this like tube onto the thing here, and he sucks onto that to suck in vapors from the blue part in the middle. Okay, so what he's sucking in are the water that has through which is bubbling through the vapors that came down through what they call the stem.
You know why this is better than smoking cigarettes?
Do you mean why is it more pleasurable or why is it more healthy?
No.
More pleasurable? I have no idea. I can't tell you.
And the other end is for another user.
Correct. This is you do this for Chavrusa.
Community.
You do this. That's correct. And so the last thing, which is that sucking that the person is doing, is quote, creating vacuum. So he's sucking in vapors, which is in turn pulling on the water, which is in turn making a vacuum to pull the vapor
that's
down
how it
the
works.
stem.
Maybe that's how it works.
Or maybe.
You have to do that to get it started.
You have to get, yes, you got to move it. If it sits for too long, you have to start again. Okay, correct. So what happens, a certain amount just builds up, a certain amount of this vapor is just building up just from it just sitting there. But then as you suck in on the tube, you create a kind of a vacuum that sucks up from the water back all the way back to the tube, and it pulls your stuff down. Okay. So now that we've got to watch pretty pictures and hear all about it, so now the point for us is that essentially what you're doing is you're making a Zei'ah out a vapor out of these are the original shisha. If therefore that would be not kosher, like the simplest one is if the glycerin and flavors are not kosher, then you just made a vapor out of something that was not kosher, and therefore, like we've been saying, it is not kosher also.
This is the original
Yeah.
vaping.
Vaping, what do you have to go to?
What?
This is before vaping.
This is
E-cigarettes.
e-cigarettes is next. You didn't read the email. The e-cigarettes is next. Okay, so this is now this is a drop different than all the cases I told you until now. Okay, and what's different about this is that this is not with heat. Okay, well, I shouldn't say it. It's basically not with heat. The vapors that you're getting are not hot vapors over here. The vapors, when they're created, are hot. I guess in a sense they're hot. It's similar in that way. But the vapors are not. The vapor that you're getting is not a hot vapor, as opposed to when the milk hits the salami, then it is hot. Okay, but when we talked about the revash originally, and as it relates to carbon dioxide that you make from chametz, there you see in the revash that hot is not critical over here. What's critical is that there's a connection between the original isser and the vapor that comes out of the other end. And over here, of course, there is. That's the whole point here. You're doing this. You don't want to drink bubble. You don't want to have water. The person's not trying to suck in water. He's trying to get whatever it is, the flavor and whatever's coming across from there. So that's considered to be is whatever it is. So if the original shisha going in is heter, then what comes out is heter also, and if it's isser, then it's isser. Okay.
But the keli itself will come also, right? That we previously used.
So the keli on the top is hot. Most of this is cold. Most of the water on the bottom is cold. So
I guess he's sucking in this vapor coming up this hot stuff. It's all cold.
Because the vapor is not terribly hot to start with, and then it bubbles through the water. The water on the bottom is ambient temperature. So you have vapor that's coming in, some vapors that are coming that are, I don't know, 150
You put
degrees.
in water in the chatchila?
This whole thing is filled with, it starts off filled with water.
Oh, why does it need water?
I think- No.
It's the same thing.
I don't know. I'm not a smoker, but I think that the point of what is, first of all, cools it down, but also it dilutes it. You're not getting all the smoke itself. You're getting a slower amount
Maybe it's
diluted in water.
bubble in the water.
Maybe, okay, maybe it could be. It's possible.
It's not the bottom part. It's a kashrus issue. It's the
I would think that, right. It's the shisha, the ingredients, and maybe on the top where it sits, where it's smoldering there, maybe it's hot. But you could talk about Blios over there. I guess so. Okay, now e-cigarettes is similar but different, right? It's a similar idea, and that is you have this thing that it's made to look like a cigarette, but really what's going on here is that there's a little place where you keep the juice, the e-liquid or the vaping juice, whatever you call it, in like a little cartridge that's towards the front near your mouth, near the person's mouth, and it has a heating element. And what it does is essentially that heating element is converting the juice into a vapor. Okay, and therefore now the person can inhale it or exhale it, whichever one he wants to do. The point is he's turning that liquid is becoming a vapor, or the liquid becomes a vapor. So the whole thing that, so to speak, looks like a cigarette is really a battery heating up an element that heats up the juice to turn it into a vapor that the person can then, as if smoke, do something that's similar to smoking off a regular cigarette. And it's the same issue. Okay, it's the same issue. It almost always has glycerin in it. Come out, they all have glycerin in them, and flavor, of course, and whatever else they have in there. But those are things that we know that are kosher sensitive, and therefore, if the person wants to use them, this is our Zei'ah that we've been talking about that has the same status as the liquid it came from. So if the liquid is kosher, then you're good, and if it's not, then you're not.
People think the issue is here that you're swallowing the particles of liquid. You're saying
Well,
it's
that's the
not-
same thing. swallow. It's not that you swallow. It's not that you.
No, so their response is the smokers say that's ridiculous.
There's no
It's
liquid in my
poisonous. It's poisonous and there's no liquid.
Well, it's poisonous. That's why you shouldn't be using it. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, if you drink it straight. The vapor is not poisonous, but the liquid itself is.
He's saying if you drank in large quantities, it wouldn't be. But the liquid is what's going into your mouth, and that's the whole point.
It's vaporized, it's burnt.
Right. So it's not burnt, it's vaporized. So vaporized is is it not royal achila? Of course it's royal. You're eating it, you're ingesting it. Whatever it is. So that's okay.
So
Anyway,
if something is not royal achila and you suck up the vapor, and that the vapor is royal to ingest.
then it is royal achila. We'll call it, you can't say it's not royal to eating when you're eating it. What does that mean?
Don't say it can't be hammer more. It can't
It's
be
not
vapor.
eating
Can't
it,
be
it's only
hammer.
going to the digestive system, goes in the respiratory system.
Okay, so you're saying is your argument that you're saying is since I'm only doing a te'ima, therefore it should not have the din. A te'im is awesome darbanan. You know, a te'im is awesome darbanan. I wasn't thinking that angle over here.
Fine,
Te'im is
fine, so if it's a sabbath button on the glycerin or whatever, because really glycerin, maybe it's precocious source maybe. So
no 50-50.
50-50 is
It's
the same.
equal. It's a suffix.
Okay.
It's not going down into your food pipe at all.
No, that would be breathe. Yeah, and that's so the glottis that closes off your digestive system.
It's very interesting. Does anybody ever say such a thing when it comes to in your reach being shut? You know, taking in. I don't know.
Okay, I have to think about that part. Okay, now let's get rid of this for a second. I'm sorry. Okay, so now there's two other things I have to tell you. Two groups of things. Okay, one is like this. I keep telling you all about the things that all the dinim, all these examples of Zei'ah, and this is Zei'ah or whatever, all kinds of things of what is or is not Zei'ah. But what's interesting, for whatever strange reason, there's a whole bunch of places where the place can use the word Zei'ah with exactly the opposite connotation. And I'll say it's Zei'ah ba'alma. Okay, it's not the thing, it's not Isser, it's Zei'ah ba'alma. It's less than the thing. Okay, so whatever strange reason, the same wording is using to have an absolute exact opposite reason. I'm going to give you 4 examples of it. Okay, one is when you probably won't know all of them, but one of them is that when the Gemara says, if you drink apple juice, you don't make ha'etz on it because it's not the apple, it's just Zei'ah ba'alma. It's not, it's less than the apple, just like the sweat of the apple, and that's said in a negative term. It's not the thing itself, it's only the Zei'ah of the thing. Okay, another one is when we did Siman Pei Aleph about Yotze, colostrum and lanolin are two things that come from living beings, and there's questions about whether they're mutter or asur. Colostrum is like a pre-milk that a mammal has before it actually is nursing. It has something called colostrum, and lanolin is like a grease that comes out of sheep wool, comes from sheep wool, and there's different questions about whether they're mutter or asur. And one of the arguments for them, both of them, is that they're just Zei'ah ba'alma. It doesn't count as a real yotze because of Zei'ah ba'alma. Okay, another is the Gemara says that tzir of dagim, of non-kosher fish, is mutter because it's Zei'ah ba'alma. That's Gemara's words over there, and has different dinim than other yotze as far as its Bitul. And the Ad Yehuda says that that's also connected to what the dinim about Blios going through an eggshell, also connected to that. We spoke about that when we did eggs right before COVID. Okay, and last is that there are some people who want to say they want to be makel about cases that the Rivash says are also like distillation, because they say certain things in certain cases we can consider to be Zei'ah ba'alma and say it's not really the yotze, even though the Rivash says that it is. Okay.
What was that?
This is, we took that in alcoholic beverages. We did that.
Wait,
Who are people, I'm not going to say names, who want to say is that certain distillation products are not asur because they're just Zei'ah ba'alma. Okay. Okay. Now, last is so far I told you that the main din, which is the Zei'ah that goes from here to there, is also when it gets over there. Then I told you that the Zei'ah itself, as it transfers, it also holds that status, like in the e-cigarette, it holds its status while it's in a Zei'ah form. And then the one last piece is that sometimes the Zei'ah could be the bridge between Isser and Heter. The Zei'ah is completely Heter itself. Okay, the Zei'ah, but it's just a medium to get the time from here to there. Okay, so we know we're going to talk about next time, Hashem, I think it is, that Eina Blue Yertzim Miklilu Kliplo Roitiv. Time can't transfer from two kalim that are touching each other unless there's Roitiv. So sometimes the Roitiv that's in between them could be a Zei'ah, could be the Roitiv in it. Okay, so the example that's for us is in a retort. you have food in a can. So today they're putting pork and beans, so that's treif. And then tomorrow they're putting in canned corn. Okay, and then canned corn is kosher. What's it's just corn. So how does the time get from the pork and beans to the canned corn? They're not cooking at the same time. So how's the time gonna get from one to the other one? So you say, no, because the device, the retort, the shell, the big tube that they're sitting in, that became treif.
Water also,
What water?
on the way in and out,
What in and out?
to retort.
Okay. In very few retorts that have water in a hydrostatic cooker. That's what you're thinking. Okay. I'm not talking about a hydrostatic cooker. Okay. In a hydrostatic cooker, there's water going in. In a standard retort, there's no water going in.
So what's the difference that Zay could be a chibur, but we don't say Zay is a chibur between the top of an oven and the bottom? We say it has to be dripping, right to dripping down.
It's an interesting question. I have to think about that. I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question. Okay.
It's clear that in a blue, yes, right? Zei'ah is qualified. So
So
say ma'at Zei'ah, ma'at roitiv.
yes, you're correct. The ma'at does not count. A little bit does not count.
Zei'ah is more than ma'at roitiv.
So it's a good question. I have to think about that. In my mind, in the retort, there's lots and lots of Zei'ah. And maybe that's enough, but maybe you're right. Maybe should we say then it shouldn't be a problem at all? Okay, I'll have to think about that. In my mind, there's lots and lots of vapor in there. I never thought about that part. We don't say it's a connection, but we say it over here. Okay.
I'm like in a keli. I think in a keli we say that it's mole Zei'ah, and that's like it's considered to be
That's
full.
touching. Yes, the hevel hakadeh. Correct.
Hevel hakdeh is worse than just.
Yes. So that you're talking about is when you have a cover on a pot, we say that the cover has to be kasher as a klivish, not as irui, because the cover hagam that the food doesn't touch it. The food is a few inches below it, but there's so much buildup of stuff in there. It's even more than Zei'ah. It's as if it's touching. It has to be kasher like a klivish. So okay, well, if you want, so you're saying is that's what I'm
Maybe
mean by a retort. Okay, but anyhow, so what I was trying to say was that by the retort the shell, the device, not the hydrostatic, the regular retort is just a big shell, and you roll 1,000 cans into it in a basket, and then you pull them out when you're finished. So the shell became treif because the steam that fills up when you cook up those cans, that steam takes time from the pork and beans into the shell, and then tomorrow from the shell back into the canned corn. Okay, so the steam itself is kosher. There's nothing treif about the steam itself, but the steam is just being the medium to get from one to the other. Okay, that's it.
Wow.